On the left, I have the male skull. On the right, I have the female skull. See, the accuracy of sexing using skull as per Krogman rule is 90%. That is, if you are brought with 100 human skulls, 90 of those skulls you will be accurately able to determine whether that is of a male or a female. In 10 skulls, you will be confused due to ambiguity of features or the mixing of features. The highest accuracy of sexing as per Krogman rule is held by the pelvis, which is 95%, and that of femur is 80%. But then when you combine multiple skeleton together, the accuracy increases. For example, if you have a skull as well as a femur from skeletal remain, the accuracy, even though for skull it is 90% and for femur it is 80%, it increases to 98%. And if you have the complete skeleton of the dead person, you will be by 100% accuracy able to determine whether that skeleton is that of a male or female. But now, for now, we are going to compare the skull of male and female. See, the general concept is that the skull of male is much more larger. It is rougher. The features are more prominent. While that of female, the features are smaller, smoother, and rounder. So with this concept, let's compare the two, but then there are going to be two exceptions that I'll share with you at the end. Two exceptions where the features are more prominent in female skull than male skull. Okay, let's begin. First, the male skull is relatively larger, thicker, stronger, and rougher or rugged. The female skull is relatively smaller, smoother, thinner, and round like that of an infant. So the female skull represents an infantile skull more. The male skull, if you look from at the forehead, if you look at the forehead, it is at an angle or a slope. The forehead, it makes a slope. It is sloping. But in female skull, the forehead, it is vertical. It is vertical. Then one of the most prominent features of male skull is the supraorbital ridge. The supraorbital ridge, this is where the eyebrows lie. It is more prominent in male and less prominent in female. In between the supraorbital ridge is the glabella. So you can see from the side that the glabella is protruding outward in male skull, but in female skull, the glabella is not protruding outward. It is continuous with the forehead. Just below the glabella is where the frontal bone meets the nasal ridge, which is called the nasion. In male skull, the nasion makes an incaving angulature. You can clearly appreciate this angle just below the glabella. But here in female skull, you cannot appreciate that inward incaving or anything like that. The nasion is continuous with glabella to the nasal ridge. Then, okie dokie. When you look at the orbit itself, the orbit itself is square in male skull. It is rounder and smaller in female skull. If you look at the lateral margin of the orbit in male skull, it is rounder. So you can see that the lateral margin is rounder, but in female skull, the lateral margin is sharper. Not only that, the position of orbit as well, it is at a lower position in male, it is at a higher position in female. Then if you look at the nasal aperture, it is longer in male, it is broader in female. The nasal aperture is present relatively higher in male. See, the orbit is lower in male and the nasal aperture is higher in male. In female, the orbit is higher and the nasal aperture is also lower. Makes sense. If you look at the margin, it is sharper in male. The margin is rounder in female. Look at the zygoma. It is so prominent in male, but in female, it is not that prominent. Now, if you look at the back, you can see that the external occipital protuberance, it is small and not that prominent in female. But in male, I'll put a picture here, it is larger and more prominent. Now, if you look at both the skulls from bottom, look at both the skulls from bottom, you can see that the palate, it is U-shaped in male, but it is parabolic in female, not U, parabolic. Parabolic means it is little bit pointed at the front. It is pointed at the front. Here it is completely U-shaped in male. If you look at the foramen magnum, I'll put a picture here. It is oblong and larger in male, but it is rounder and smaller in female. So with all those features, you can easily differentiate the male skull from female skull. Obviously, you need to look at the mandible as well. So we will deal with mandible soon enough. But first, what were the two exceptions that I was talking about? What are exceptionally more prominent in female and less prominent in male? Those are, see, you can see right here, the frontal eminence and the parietal eminence. I repeat, the frontal eminence and the parietal eminence are more prominent in female as compared to male. Rest everything is more prominent in male. Rest everywhere there are muscle attachment, it is more prominent in male. So let's revise. Revise. The male skull is larger, thicker and rougher. The female skull is smaller, thinner and softer. The male skull has the cranial capacity of around 1500 cc. The female skull has on average 10% less at around 1350 cc. The supraorbital ridge is more prominent in male. It is less prominent in female. The glabella is protruding outward in male. The glabella is not protruding outward in female. The nasal is incaving with an angulature inside. The nasal is not incaving with an angulature inside in female. The orbit itself is square-shaped in male. The orbit is rounder in female. The lateral margin is rounder in male. The lateral margin is sharper in female. The orbit is placed lower in male. The orbit is placed higher in female. The nasal aperture, it is longer in male. The nasal aperture is broader in female. The nasal aperture is placed higher in male. The nasal aperture is placed lower in female. The zygoma is more prominent in male. The zygoma is less prominent in male. Behind, the external occipital protuberance is more prominent in male. It is less prominent in female. Below the palate, it is U-shaped in male. In female, it is parabolic shaped. The foramen magnum, it is larger and oblong in male. It is smaller and rounder in female. And what are the two exceptions which are more prominent in female as compared to male? They are the frontal eminence and the parietal eminence. Remember, the frontal eminence and the parietal eminence are more prominent in female than male.